Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Also, check out the Swag Cave, done by our good friends, Resonance Branding Company. You can get that link to the Swag Cave in the podcast description. We're going to talk a little bit about maybe the Lakers getting a big fish for their new head coach Hurley over there from UConn. We're going to talk about that with Brandon Berg in just a second. But I'm going to bring in Brandon now, actually, and I want to talk a little baseball to open up the podcast. Brewers baseball. First sweep of the Brewers this year. Now the ironic Phillies are the only team that have not been swept so far this year in the National League. But before the series started, we talked about, okay, this is a great test for the Brewers, maybe a litmus test to see where this team is at. Okay, you got swept. Every game was close. And you look at how the Brewers threw out their pitches. I mean, you had Candy getting, the openers in 2 starts, and then Aaron Ashby getting called up and getting the start yesterday. Doesn't have to necessarily be a moral victory, but if we use this as a test, yes, they got swept, but do we take anything positive from this? And there was a quote from Yelich, I don't know if you saw this after the game, that I thought it was a perfect quote. He said, I'll paraphrase it here a little bit. He said, but, we proved that we can play with anybody, but there's a difference, and I love this part. There's a difference between playing with anybody and beating everybody. And I thought that was a great quote from Yelich. And I think, my personal opinion, that's where maybe the Brewers are at this point in time. What do you take away from this series against the Phillies?
I think that's along the right lines. I'm not going to I'm not going to try to make any wide-ranging thoughts or opinions based on those 3 games. Mm-hmm. But there were 3 games that were close, and the offense just every time it seemed like they were poised for a big inning, it was.
They didn't capitalize, right?
They didn't capitalize. The Phillies made a outstanding play on defense. Like it was kind of one of those series which you have where you can't quite get over the hill. You can't quite get over the hump, and that was just kind of the way it went. Yeah, pitching wise, and especially considering that there was a series they didn't pitch Freddie Peralta in. Right. So they all had 7 runs in 3 games. That's pretty ideal. Mm-hmm. It's just that they only scored 3.
Yeah.
3. So
no, 2.
Huh?
3-1, 2-1, and then 2-0.
Okay, yeah.
So, 2 runs.
Obviously, you're not going to win very many series when you only score 2 runs. But,
right.
But I think that's a good way to put it from what Yelich said. Like, yeah, they can play with anybody, but right now you kind of got that separation of the Phillies and the Dodgers in the National League, and the Brewers will obviously play the Dodgers later on this year, and we'll see where they're at when that time comes. But
right,
it's still, even though things have gone really well so far, and they were coming off that really good home, stand against the Chicago teams, like there's still work to do.
Right. I feel like, too, Aaron Ashby, we know the Brewers are invested on Aaron Ashby. Like, he got that contract, then last year got hurt. We didn't see him at all. I thought that was a great outing from him when you put everything in perspective. Obviously, you want to see the walks get down. He had 5 walks. The one mistake was capitalized yesterday. But did he do everything that the Brewers were hoping for yesterday, and did he earn another start through the rotation?
I think so, and I think he might have just because they kind of need it.
Yeah.
But I think the most encouraging thing for him was the velocity was kind of a little bit closer to what you expect out of him. Mm-hmm. Earlier on when he was up, and even when he was in the minors, it was more lower 90s, which he's been more mid 90s, and it doesn't sound like a big difference, but it is a big difference. Mm-hmm. So to be able to do that and throwing multiple pitches for strikes, his changeup has kind of become really more important for him. You need that when you're going against lefties and righties. He's got the big slider, the hard sinker, that kind of stuff. But I think that was very encouraging, and you're hoping you can just kind of build on. You can, like you said, kind of cut down the walks a little bit, and you're always kind of wondering when, for me, when it comes to baseball and baseball pitchers, like shoulder injuries are much worse than elbow injuries. An arm, well, I guess your elbows and your shoulders and your arm, but
head, shoulders, knees and toes.
But to me, shoulder injuries I'm always a little bit more concerned about. Mm-hmm. when people are coming back, like someone like Jimmy Nelson, when he hurt his in 2017, like he never recovered. Like he's bounced around the majors a little bit, but he's not the same guy he was that year when it really looked like he had kind of broken out as a legitimate ace for the team.
And that's what we're worried about with Woodruff,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. So, but yeah, it was encouraging. His last few starts in the minors were good too. So, and I even said, when we talked about him a month or two ago, I'm like, it's going to take some time. And I was kind of hoping he would get that time in the minors, which outside of having to make that one appearance, I think it was against the Reds, where they absolutely needed it. Like, he did get that time to kind of ramp it back up, and it's gotten better. So you're just kind of hoping that it's just going to keeps building from there, because he's kind of a with the injury and stuff, he's kind of been a bit of a forgotten guy, but he can be someone that can be very important.
Right. Yeah, I mean, then, Robert Gasser's on the IL. We don't know how long. I mean, that's going to be a tricky situation. They're calling it a strain over there, but, we'll see. And then, I mean, at this point in time, I know it's June and trade deadline's not till July 30th, but, I was going over some names on Monday, some potential name. Obviously, everybody's looking at the White Sox to see if they're going to unload on pitchers. I mean, there's a couple veterans on the Mets. I mean, Quintana's got to finish off the bingo card, right, and play for the Brewers at some point.
Feels like they almost have to trade for him just so he doesn't end up going
pitching
somewhere else to pitch against them. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's to me. I mean, do you think they need at least one or at least two starters right now, or is it maybe a starter and a long relief kind of guy, since they've been using that opener?
I think you could go. I think at least one starter is a good place to start, because I still think Bryce Wilson could bounce back into that long relief role if they need it. I mean, he's been good as a starter, so. But I think ultimately he's still better suited long reliever. But yeah, I think starter is going to be the big thing for them. And maybe some sort of veteran kind of backup infield bat, because once you get beyond the starters, around the horn, like it gets a little, the water gets deep fast. Like no offense to guys like Andrew Monasterio or Oliver Dunn, but like if you're going to be a legitimate team that makes a run in the playoffs, like I feel like maybe like a right-handed guy that hits lefties, like guy. I mean, thinking over the years, the guys that Brewers have acquired that have kind of been that, a guy like a Jerry Harrison in 2011, a guy that could bounce around the infield. He ended up playing a lot down the stretch when Casey McGee struggled, and he was actually pretty valuable for them. But a guy like that,
or Perez, or Hernan Perez,
I mean, that would be a good one too. I mean, he was a little bit more versatile because he could play outfield too. But a guy that if that could play second base or play third base, or maybe even just get a big pinch hit late if they're going up against a tough lefty reliever.
They need Craig Counsell?
Well, Craig Counsell wasn't a lefty hitter, so I mean, he was a lefty. He didn't hit against lefties. He was a lefty hitter, but so I'm trying to think of some other examples. But some guys like that can play second, play third, maybe play first. And bounce around and just give you a good at bat up from the right side.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it seems like it's a foregone conclusion almost at this point. I know it's kind of dangerous when you talk about the Brewers, but that they're going to try to acquire some players.
I think so. I mean, they're in a position to buy.
Yeah.
And especially, I think, with, this being Adames' last year of his deal, they obviously like to bring him back, but they're not going to ink him to an extension during the year.
Yeah.
At this point, it's just going to it seems like it's just going to, he's going to get his chance to test free agency, and he still might come back, but,
Well, let me ask you that. I asked that on Monday because we're going through the comments from Matt Arnold and Mark Anasio, and, one of the topics was Willie Adames, and Mark was open, I think, quite a bit in some of that. Even, I mean, he pretty much alluded, we gave Pat Murphy a courtesy interview, and then he nailed it. He's like, oh, okay, maybe we should actually talk to him. I'm like, ooh, okay. But then, he said, hey, we've had conversations about an extension for Adames. We've had offers for Adames. He loves Adames. Talked about him being a team leader. Okay, so we asked, would you bring him back knowing you got an Ortiz? Maybe that is still there. We know it's going to be a big price. Then you already have Yelich under contracts. I mean, yes, I would love to have Willie Adames back on there, but for baseball, we have to think about the numbers in that aspect. Do you think there is a decent shot that he could be back next year?
I think so. He's going to go out and he's going to test it. And, right now, assuming he finishes like he's playing this year, he's played well this year. I mean, he's been a bit hit or miss. He kind of went from, being an NL Player of the Week to struggling in that Philly series, but I mean everyone struggled in that Philly series offensively. So, but he's done a really good job since he got to Milwaukee, cutting down strikeouts.
He's always been a very good defender.
Yeah, and even when his offense has been up and down, it doesn't really seem like that's ever impacted his defense. His defense has always been solid. So, that's the kind of profile and that I think could get him paid in free agency. And it's just a matter of, sometimes it takes that one team just to make the deal.
And shortstops have been kind of weird, it seems like, in free agency, too, like these last few years. Like, there's been guys like, how are they not signed?
Right.
And then you get guys with the long-term deals.
Yeah, you got a guy like Dansby Swanson cashed in last year with the Cubs.
Yeah.
But, yeah, you're right. There's some others that maybe didn't get what you were expecting. So, it's just going to be something that, I think they just kind of take it to that point, and then you see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be it. Because I thought, okay, foregone, Willie's gone after this year for sure. And, you got Ortiz there. But now I'm like, oh, maybe he could be back next year.
Possible.
I know, going back to our preseason predictions, I thought he was going to be traded because I thought the Brewers weren't going to be in a playoff contention.
Right.
You had him going to the playoffs. I mean, are they still kind of exceeding your expectations? Maybe more so on the offensive side.
I think so.
Point?
Yeah, I would say especially offensive. I mean, Contreras. I think I don't know if we expected this, but we expect him to be good because at the end of the day, that's what he does best. He's gotten better on defense, but he's a hitter.
Yeah.
Christian Yelich, he's been really good.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much to complain about there.
Rhys Hoskins is doing what we were hoping,
exactly.
right?
He's got an OPS around 800. He's in some home runs. The average isn't super high, but he takes his walks, and he's obviously been a helpful veteran in the dugout. He's done exactly what you could have hoped for out of a guy in that spot.
And Terang's taken a jump.
Yeah, it's been guys like Terang and Ortiz that have really taken that step forward. I mean, the quantum leap, as Pat Murphy had said about Bryce Terang in preseason, but those guys have both went. Jorge Ortiz, I don't know if there just wasn't. We weren't sure what to expect. Terang obviously last year was really a struggle, but those. Immediately. Those are now your two leadoff hitters, depending on if it's righties or lefties. And even when Ortiz is hitting in the lower part of the lineup, he still always seems to be coming up in big spots.
Right.
So. That's all you can really hope for out of those guys.
Right. Because I don't feel like there's that, going back to the trade deadline, there's not that CC Sabathia, right?
No, I don't know. Realistically, the best pitchers out there, obviously you mentioned the White Sox, Garrett Crochet is one. He's one that I'm just a little leery on because he was a reliever that became a starter. And I just, he's pitched very well for them. Obviously he shut down the Brewers last weekend, but, he's one I'm not sure about.
What about Fetty?
That would probably be that might be a little bit more in their price range, but of course, he's someone that maybe doesn't have quite the highest ceiling.
One question I threw out there too is there was a couple on the Mets, obviously Quintana and I think Severino was the other one,
and maybe Shamania.
Yeah. What do you see the Brewers potentially going for? A guy who has that 1 year deal where it's a prorate salary this year and they're not committed.
Right. You don't give up much, but what you're getting is a veteran down the stretch. I think a guy like
Or do they want more control with those younger guys?
Right. That's going to be the question. The guy I think of in that motto is a Gio Gonzalez in 2018.
That's the name I threw out there.
He pitched well for the Brewers, but he was a guy that was kind of there wasn't a lot of pomp and circumstance when he was acquired, but he was just a solid. He was
going to eat innings, and you knew he was going to make a start.
Right, and he was he would get. He wasn't going to get hit around too much, so you'd have a chance to win. And that would probably be those guys you mentioned. A guy like you mentioned that might cost a little more, but would have maybe a guy like Jesus Luzardo from Miami.
Right. Yeah.
Because if Miami's out of it, they've already traded Luis Arraez, so maybe they're looking a little bit more. He's a young lefty. I think he's 26, so he'd still be under control a while.
Then that was my question too, because they've got these crop of pitchers. Assuming everybody's healthy, Robert Gasser's going to be a part of it. Freddie's going to be there yet. Aaron Ashby, if he's right, up there. I don't know, if Jacob Mizorowski, how close, potentially. But how much would they want to invest on another pitcher with control if they got these young guys that are ready to make that step?
That's what you got to balance. And then, what you're giving up for that. Because it would be to give up to get somebody like that would be significant. You're looking at.
And DL Hall, too.
Yeah, and DL Hall is kind of the wild card in this, too. So, there's. It's not that they don't have options. It's just at some point you want those options to become a little bit more certainties.
Right.
You're just not sure. They've been able to kind of make it work so far with, Joe Ross has pitched, all right. I think that one bad start kind of blew up his ERA a little bit and stuff like that. But, if you're going to be a legitimate contender, those are guys that maybe are a little bit better going multi-innings, come out of the bullpen.
Mm-hmm.
But then the issue you run into there is they found so many guys out of the bullpen this year that you're kind of struggling for spots. People weren't expecting Jared Koenig and more recent days, Patrick Paredes. Paredes. Like, there's just been so many guys that have kind of, they've made the most of their opportunity, which is a really good thing. But then you just kind of have a little bit less wiggle room, and we know the Brewers kind of like to shuttle guys back and forth between AAA and the majors when it works for them.
For anybody who maybe doesn't know or maybe question it, I mean, for Koenig to get these openers, is it straight up just to force the other team to throw out a certain lineup?
Well, it's
kind of what Council was doing with the Dodgers in that playoff series.
They're doing it anytime you have a team that's loaded with lefties at the top, and that's what happened between the Red Sox and then with the Phillies, where they had really good lefties at the top, and you're just looking to get that matchup the first time through. I mean, you know that he's probably going to pitch at some point anyway, so you get that matchup the first time through, and it worked out well for them with Koenig in those instances. And you kind of just go from there. And also, though, you need a certain type of pitcher that's following. I think that kind of understands that their routine's getting not necessarily messed with a little bit. It's just different. Like guys like Colin Ray and Bryce Wilson, who are used to that. Like, they're used to kind of coming out of the bullpen. Remember, Ray did a little bit last year, so obviously Wilson did. Like, it doesn't bother them much. You're not going to do that with, like, Freddie Peralta.
Right. Or maybe former Brewer Adrian Hauser you could do that with.
Yes. Anyone that's kind of in that spot that's used to pitching long relief, because it's just a much – you're still going through your pregame routine. You're just maybe doing it a little bit later.
Yeah.
So, but that's why you're doing it. You're doing it if you get a team that's just loaded with lefties at the top, and you want to get that matchup, that first inning in the third, whatever. Because you're facing those guys 3 or maybe 4 times, if you can. I mean, well, probably more 4 or 5, but like if you can get that matchup that first time, I mean that's big.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break, and we're going to talk a little basketball coming up next. We're getting set for another busy travel season, vacations, taking our kids to all their games and activities, and you need a proper vehicle to get you to where you're going, and safely. That's where Toyson Ford can help you. Toyson Ford will go the extra mile to provide you with compelling options for new and used car shopping. They will gladly work with you on financing no matter what your budget may be. They're committed to giving drivers across the Chippewa Valley the best in customer service. Check them out for yourself. Visit Toyson Ford in Chippewa Falls today and check out their website, toysonford.net. Sweet, sweet summertime is here, Chippewa Valley, and it's time to load up on snacks and meals for the summer. Whether you're stocking up for the kids this summer, preparing for a cookout, or a long road trip, Hy-Vee in Eau Claire is your home for all of your summer food needs. From high-quality deli selections, a wide variety in the meat department, to the fantastic bakery and wine and spirits department, Hy-Vee has something for everyone to enjoy this summer. And don't forget to check out their team shop in case you're tailgating at a ball game this summer. Hy-Vee in Eau Claire, your summertime headquarters in the Chippewa Valley. That was that the Lakers are trying their butts off to hire Dan Hurley from UConn, willing to give him a massive a contract long term. Got to imagine probably making him one of the highest paid coaches in the NBA right off the bat. The initial reaction from a lot of people was like, here's another example of the state of college athletics. And I don't know if this has ever happened before. The defending college football national champion coach won't be back to defend it. If he takes his job, it'll be the defending men's basketball national champion, not back going to the pro level. I don't know if that's happened before where, those two coaches. So that was the first reaction is this another example of the state of college athletics where these coaches are trying to jump ship and, with NIL and all that. But the more that I think about it, too, is like, you know what, though? But we've seen examples of this in college basketball. Pitino, Calipari, Billy Donovan, Brad Stevens, and we've seen those examples. And Dan Hurley, I mean, Paulie Patrick retweeted the interview, but when they had Dan Hurley on the Dan Patrick Show, he kind of alluded to, like, the NBA was kind of an interest to him at some point. So I don't know if this is another example of this, because we've seen those examples in college basketball before.
Right, and I think everybody knew with Jim Harbaugh, he wanted to get back in the NFL.
Yeah.
And it was just timing. And it was timing because, hey, he delivered on what he wanted to do. He brought a national title to his alma mater. But also because of some other things going on, maybe it was a good time to leave town.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So, I agree with you there. And then, with the potential of Hurley ending up with the Lakers, remember, it was like 20 years ago or whatever when the Lakers pursued Mike Krzyzewski?
that's who I was bringing up before. Kobe wanted, Mike Krzyzewski.
So it's like I get it. Like,
Tom Izzo's been out there how many years?
Like I get it. Like there's probably. I mean, I'm sure there are coaches out there that, are very frustrated right now with how things might be with college athletics. And maybe that's a reason. But I don't think it was within like the top couple. Like if you're making a pie chart, I'm sure the two top biggest pieces of the pie for Harbaugh and potentially Hurley if he goes are opportunity and money.
Yes. Couple things too. I'm glad you brought up Krzyzewski. It's a what if question. We don't know, but like to me, I wondered because I'm glad you brought that up again about the Lakers and Kobe tried to get Coach K and such. If NIL and transfer portal, like the current situation we're in right now with college sports, if that happened 20 years earlier, would Coach K have made the jump?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Like, I would love to.
Yeah,
we'll never know.
Yeah, we'll never know because, like you said, it's a what if.
Yeah, and we could ask him, and but the answer might be different. Now hindsight 2020 as compared to what it actually would have been like in the thing.
Right.
But that's something to me. Like we look at these college lifers, Roy Williams, guys like that, Bill Self at Kansas right now. Obviously Jay Wright's retired. We don't know what. I don't think he's going to be coming back or doing anything. Or Tom Izzo. If this whole thing had started 20 years earlier, would Coach K
when they were all a little younger?
Yeah, if Kobe makes that call to Coach K, and current with NIL and transfer portal going and say, hey, Coach K, we'd love that. Does he make that jump then?
I mean, you would think he would maybe be a little more receptive. Again, we don't know, but
I probably would have liked it because maybe Wisconsin would have won that national championship.
Whoever would have replaced him then,
might
not have been able to rail on the refs enough to change, to call a different game in the second half. But regardless,
yeah.
But
and here's Andy Katz made a great point about this on Twitter too, which the one luxury a guy like Dan Hurley has, if it doesn't work in the NBA, he's going to get a primo job in college.
Yeah, he'll be able to come back. Like he is. Barring being involved in some sort of like scandal or something, he can basically kind of write his own check for where he wants to go.
Yes.
I mean, UConn is a premier program spot to be, but you're right. If he goes to Lakers for 2 years and it bombs out, yeah, he'll come back and there'll be a power four, I guess if that's the word for it now, job waiting for whoever, for him at any major spot.
Right. Exactly. It happened to Pitino. It happened to Calipari. He has that luxury where, if he's
a made man.
Yeah, and if that was a goal or is a goal of his to someday get to the NBA and try it, the timing right now works because his stock is so high in college basketball that regardless of what happens in the NBA, teams will line up to hire him in a few years if he wants to.
And if it's the Lakers, I mean, it's I have to imagine that's something. I mean, we've seen LeBron speak highly of him. He's jumping on a team with LeBron, with Anthony Davis. Obviously, and some younger guys. Obviously, there's work to do there because there's a reason they're looking for a coach. But it's not like he's going to the Wizards.
Yeah,
I mean, he's earned the right to be able to be kind of smart with this and go somewhere where he's going to have an opportunity to win. He's not going to the NBA just because he's going to the NBA. He's going to the NBA because it's going to be a good opportunity.
The one thing I think that I'm curious to see the interactions, though, is Dan Hurley is a very animated coach, a very high-energy coach. We've seen that. And I look at that Lakers team, which I think they need some energy because they look lethargic at times. But with the current state of where LeBron's at in his career, is that something he's going to embrace?
Right.
That's the one thing I'm curious and I kind of want to see happen.
Right. I think so. I mean, I think that's something he would kind of understand. Like, hey, you wanted someone different. Like, you wanted something different at this stage of the game. You really think highly of this guy. Like,
and the thing is, too, okay, LeBron, if this is a guy that you want and it's going to cost a lot of money to bring him in, let him do his thing.
Right.
Let him do his thing.
Yeah, don't try to kind of puppet master the coach. Like let him coach you.
Yes, let him.
If you like him,
thing.
this guy this much, trust that he knows what he's doing and that what he can bring to the table is going to get you back where you want to go.
Yes, exactly. So, at this point, if it's a Woj bomb, it's got to be pretty close.
When there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, and the timing of it too is like What was the last 2 days? Oh, it's J.J. Redick. It's J.J. Redick.
And that's why when I woke up this morning and saw that, I'm like, oh, wow, I was just kind of assuming it was going to be Redick, which this is a much better option than Redick. No offense to J.J. Redick, but I would rather take an established college coach versus a guy that I'm sure obviously played for a long time in the NBA and is thought of very highly from some people, but like had no coaching experience in the NBA.
Right. Yeah. And
or in college or anywhere.
JJ's LeBron's podcast buddy.
Yeah.
Which, you got that. And that's not to diminish JJ's knowledge or anything. But you're literally and we've seen that before with broadcasters, making the jump and getting that experience. And they've had success.
Yeah.
But with the current state of this team right now, it's
a win now.
Yeah.
It's a win now. You're looking to plug in somebody that you that can have you deep in the playoffs next year.
Yeah. Another tweet from Andy Katz, former Badger,
yes.
UW Madison alum. So whatever he says, I always him and Jay Billis are like my two favorite college basketball. He says, 1, coaches adapt all the time to the personnel and to the job, so don't underestimate the ability to change the tone. 2, if you're coaching elite players at every position, then you may not have to be as intense or in as much control on every possession. Maybe kind of related to what we were just saying about Dan Hurley's.
Right. Maybe part of the reason that he is that way is because he knows he's got to really kind of manage. It's like if you're a boss for somebody at a job and like you kind of have to be on them because you know they need it. But if there's people that you really trust that you know are very good at what they do, you kind of let them go.
Right. Yeah. You don't bother them too much. Right.
Right. You don't have to go up and say, hey, make sure you get that report done because you know they're going to get that report done because they always do.
Yeah. Number 3, former college coaches do love that in the NBA they just coach ball and don't have to deal with recruiting or off-court commitments. 4, Hurley may stay like Izzo and Coach K did, but 2024-25 is also not like at all the early 2000s in this sport, something we were just talking about. The ability to completely control / run a program from head coach down is not the norm. The money needed to manage a roster now is not in a college head coach's ultimate control. Again, kind of what we were talking about with the change.
It could be a factor, but again, I still think money and opportunity, money paid to coach and opportunity for coach are going to supersede that.
Right. Yeah. So definitely a big Woj bomb.
Yeah.
Here, I think that would be a home run hire for the Lakers.
I think so, based on kind of the other names that they were looking at. That's.
And the thing is, I know it's college, but Hurley's a basketball name, whether it's been his brother. Bobby or anything like that. Hurley's a basketball name. We've heard about them for a long time. So, and that is going to do it for us on this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Until next time, I'm Dan Casper, and I will talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.